All right, welcome back for another deep dive. Today we're going to be tackling something pretty interesting. We've got an article here from Bitcoin Magazine, and the title is, well, it's a bit provocative. Michael Saylor doesn't understand Bitcoin.
Yeah, a little controversial, right? You've got Michael Saylor, Mr. Bitcoin himself, the guy who's like, I don't know how much money into Bitcoin, and they're saying he doesn't even understand it. It's a head scratcher for sure.
Yeah, it definitely caught my eye. So today we're going to try to figure out, what's going on here. What exactly is Saylor saying? Where's this disconnect coming from? And what does it mean for Bitcoin's future? Our main source is this article from Bitcoin Magazine, which comes from an interview Saylor did on the Galaxy Brains podcast.
Right. So the big issue seems to be that Saylor sees Bitcoin as capital, like an investment, not so much a currency you spend. He's saying it's more like digital gold or real estate, something you hold on to hoping it goes up in value, not something you use to buy coffee.
I see. He actually uses this analogy about being paid with, like, a slice of a sports team. He says it's the same logic as using Bitcoin for everyday purchases, which is a kind of a striking image, right? Like, here's your pizza and a tenth of a share of the Lakers.
Yeah, very colorful analogy.
Yeah.
But the author of this Bitcoin Magazine piece, Frank Korva, he strongly disagrees. He says if you're just dismissing Bitcoin as a currency, you're ignoring what makes it valuable in the first place, its potential as money.
Right. He even points to the Bitcoin whitepaper, the original document that describes how Bitcoin works. He says it talks about Bitcoin as electronic cash over and over again, but it never mentions the word capital once.
Yeah, Korva's point is that the store of value aspect and the medium of exchange aspect, they're connected. You can't really have one without the other. They feed into each other.
That makes sense. So how does this idea of Bitcoin's divisibility play into all of this? The article mentions that as a key difference between Bitcoin and something like gold.
Ah, yes, that's an important point. You can't exactly split a gold bar into tiny pieces to buy a cup of coffee. Korva actually quotes Alex Bergeron here, who says that Bitcoin's divisibility down to 8 decimal places makes it way more flexible for transactions of all sizes.
So you could, theoretically, buy that coffee in a house with Bitcoin. Okay, so that makes sense. But Saylor has his own arguments, right? He actually cites Jerome Powell, the Fed chair himself, saying that Bitcoin is competing with gold, not the dollar, which seems to support his whole Bitcoin as capital idea.
It is kind of ironic, though, isn't it? Saylor's using a statement from the head of the institution that Bitcoin was, in a way, designed to disrupt to support his point.
Yeah, like fighting fire with fire or something. So we've got these two camps, Bitcoin as capital versus Bitcoin as money. And then on top of that, Saylor throws in this whole evil genius strategy that involves the U.S. government going all in on Bitcoin.
Oh, yeah, this is where things get interesting. His idea is that the U.S. should buy up massive amounts of Bitcoin, like become a Bitcoin whale, push the price way up.
And then, boom, they introduce USD-backed stablecoins as the new global currency, which Korva doesn't seem too thrilled about.
Yeah, not exactly a fan. And you can see why. We just had that whole 2008 financial crisis, right? A lot of people saw Bitcoin as a way to move away from the dangers of centralized systems.
So to then turn around and say, let's give those same institutions even more power by letting them issue stablecoins. It does make you wonder.
Korva actually quotes Matt Taibbi here, who once called Goldman Sachs a vampire squid wrapped around the face of humanity. Which, kind of paints a picture of how some people feel about that whole situation.
Right. There's a lot of distrust there. So in part one, we've got this main conflict. Saylor sees Bitcoin as digital gold, setting the stage for a USD stablecoin world. Korva says, no, that's not what Bitcoin is about. It's about being a decentralized currency, a real alternative to the current system.
Now, in part two, we're going to dive deeper into all of this. We'll look at the whole stablecoin concept in more detail, the 2008 crisis, and see what all of this could mean for the future of finance.
All right, so we've got this clash of visions. Saylor's Bitcoin as capital, supporting a USD stablecoin world, versus Korva's Bitcoin as money, a decentralized alternative. Before we go too deep into the implications of each, can we unpack this stablecoin thing a little for people who might not be totally familiar? What are we even talking about here?
Yeah, good point. A stablecoin is basically, it's a cryptocurrency that's designed to stay at a stable value, right? It's usually pegged to something like the US dollar or even gold. The idea is to get the benefits of crypto, like fast transactions, global accessibility, but without all the price volatility.
So like instead of Bitcoin going up and down crazily, a stablecoin tied to the dollar would, in theory, always be worth around $1.
Exactly. And that predictability can be, really helpful for day-to-day transactions. You wouldn't have to constantly worry about your money changing value all the time.
But Korva seems really skeptical of Saylor's idea that these USD stablecoins will become like the main global currency, especially if they're issued by the same institutions that were at the heart of the 2008 crisis.
And he's not alone. A lot of people in the Bitcoin community are wary of stablecoins, especially those issued by, centralized institutions. Because remember, one of the main reasons people got excited about Bitcoin in the first place was this idea of decentralization, a financial system that's more transparent, less prone to, manipulation.
Right, because with traditional banks, there's always this element of trust involved. You're trusting them to be responsible with your money, to not make risky decisions that could lead to another meltdown like 2008.
Exactly. So for a lot of folks, the idea of those same institutions being in charge of stablecoins is kind of defeats the purpose.
Yeah, like putting the fox in charge of the henhouse. So Saylor seems to be saying, let's use Bitcoin to create a system where the US dollar, basically in the form of stablecoins, becomes even more powerful globally. And Korva is saying, wait, that's not what this is about. We're trying to move away from that kind of centralized control.
It's a really fundamental difference in how they see the world, right? Saylor's kind of saying, let's make the current system better. Korva's saying, no, we need something completely new.
Like, Saylor wants to optimize the current system. Korva wants to build a whole new operating system. So let's say, just for argument's sake, that Saylor's plan works. The U.S. buys tons of Bitcoin, the price goes crazy, and they successfully make these USD stablecoins the global currency. What are the downsides there, from Korva's point of view?
Well, for Korva, it would mean we're just, centralizing things even more. Remember, one of the big innovations of Bitcoin is that it's independent. It doesn't rely on any government or bank. You can send it directly to someone else, no permission needed.
But with USD stablecoins, wouldn't we be right back to relying on the U.S. government and whoever's issuing those stablecoins?
Exactly. We'd be swapping one centralized system for another. And as Korva points out, history has shown us, time and time again, that those kinds of systems are vulnerable to corruption, to manipulation. They can collapse.
So for those who believe in this whole decentralized idea behind Bitcoin, Saylor's vision is almost like a worst-case scenario. It's using this revolutionary technology to just prop up the very power structures it was supposed to challenge.
And it all comes back to this idea of Bitcoin as money. If it's just a store of value, it can be controlled, manipulated, even confiscated. But if it's widely used as money, like for everyday transactions, it becomes a lot harder to control.
It's like the more people use Bitcoin as money, the more decentralized and resilient it becomes.
Precisely. And that's a crucial point that often gets lost. Saylor's so focused on the price, on how Bitcoin can boost the US dollar, he kind of misses the whole point of it being a currency that can change how things work.
It's interesting because even if you buy Saylor's argument that Bitcoin is mainly a store of value, Korva's saying its success, even as a store of value, depends on people using it as a currency.
Exactly. It's like a chicken and egg thing. You need people to believe it's valuable to want to use it, but you also need them to use it for it to actually become valuable.
Right, so it's all interconnected. That's why Korva keeps going back to the Bitcoin whitepaper. Satoshi's original vision of Bitcoin as electronic cash. It's a reminder that this technology has the potential to really shake things up, to change the financial system from the ground up.
Yeah, it's a powerful idea.
So even if Saylor's plan sounds kind of tempting, it's important to think about the potential downsides of giving even more power to these centralized institutions. Korva is really pushing us to ask, are we using Bitcoin to its full potential, or are we just using it to reinforce the same old systems? What strikes me is how both Saylor and Korva's arguments, they kind of come down to this idea of trust, or maybe a lack of trust in certain things.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. It's like Saylor saying, look, the system we've got, it's not perfect, but it's what we've got. Let's use Bitcoin to make it, more stable, more efficient. His trust is in this reformed version of the existing system.
While Korva's like, nope, we've seen how this plays out. We need to build something totally new from the ground up, something we can trust because it's not controlled by, a handful of powerful players.
Yeah.
So his trust is more in the tech itself, the whole decentralized nature of Bitcoin.
And that's why this whole debate is so important. It's not just about Bitcoin. It's about the future of finance, really. Like, who do we trust with our money? What kind of world are we trying to build here?
Right, because let's face it, most people aren't sitting around thinking about monetary policy or blockchain or whatever. But all these decisions being made right now about Bitcoin, stablecoins, digital currencies, this stuff will affect us.
Absolutely. It's about how we pay for things, how we save, even how we access, basic financial services. All that could change in the next few years. And which path we choose, whether it's more like Saylor's vision or Korva's, will have a big impact.
So what does this mean for our listeners? Well, first of all, if you've stuck with us this far, you're already doing something right. You're curious, you're engaging with these complex ideas, and that's awesome.
Yeah, don't just take our word for it. Don't just take Saylor's word for it or Korva's. Go do your own research. Read the Bitcoin white paper. Check out different crypto projects. Listen to different perspectives.
I would say the best way to learn something is to just dive in, get your hands a little dirty, maybe even buy a tiny bit of Bitcoin just to see how it works. You might be surprised what you learn.
The important thing is to stay open-minded, be a little skeptical, and be willing to learn and adapt as things change. Because one thing's for sure. Finance is changing fast, and Bitcoin is right at the center of it all.
So whether you see Bitcoin as digital gold, a revolutionary currency, or something in between, it's definitely a force to be reckoned with. And understanding these different perspectives, the hopes, the fears, the possibilities, the risks, that's what will help us shape the future of finance in a way that works for everyone.
Yeah, at the end of the day, isn't that what we all want? A financial system that's fair, transparent, accessible, one that benefits everyone, not just a small group of insiders.
We started this deep dive asking, does Michael Saylor really understand Bitcoin? But maybe the bigger question is, do we? And are we willing to put in the effort to have these important conversations to make sure that Bitcoin's potential is used for good?
Because the future of finance, it's not something that just happens to us. We're creating it right now, every day, with the choices we make, the conversations we have.
So keep those conversations going, keep asking questions, and keep exploring. The future of money is being written right now, and it's up to all of us to decide what that story looks like. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep learning, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.